Hey guys, this is Jochen. Welcome to my channel. If you've ever dealt with street photography, you know that speed can be very important. One method for super fast focusing is the zone focusing method, which I would like to explain to you today in the Fuji-X system. Here we go! Before I start with today's topic, I want to explain something. Maybe you are confused about the channel's new name. But in connection with the switch to English, a German channel name simply didn't make sense anymore. So welcome to my channel, J Shooter. By the way, I'm no rifle type of guy. And I wanted to remind you of subscribing to my channel if you enjoy this or my other videos. This would be really helpful for me. So let's go! Click the subscribe button! But back to topic. Zone focusing is a method of setting up the lens in a way that a specific zone is always in focus. This can be, for example, a range of 1.5 to 5 meters. This gives you the advantage that a person or other object that is within this zone will be always in focus when you take your picture. So you don't have to change the focus all the time. Instead, you use your feet and maybe move the camera additionally so that the object is inside of this focus zone. This is a huge advantage for street photography, for example, where you want to quickly catch a scene. In order for the accuracy to be high, this is something for rather smaller apertures like 5.6 or 8. To use zone focusing, you first have to prepare your camera. I will show you on the Fuji-X system, but it works similarly with other systems. First of all, you set the focus mode to M, like manual. On Fuji X-Cameras, it's usually done with this front dial. Next, we want to turn on the focus indicator. To do so, go to Setup, Screen Settings, Display Custom Setting in the menu and make sure that the MF distance indicator is checked. A very important note: the display of this scale does not work if you use the large indicators mode with the LCD or EVF on the X-T3 or X-T30, for example. This setting, done by mistake, drove me crazy on my X-T3 because I could not find the error for ages. On other cameras, for example the X-E3, this setting is not even available, so you don't have to take care. If you have done everything correctly, you will now see this new scale. Now we check whether meter is given as the unit of measure. If not, we look again in Setup, Screen Setup, and then on page 2 in the Focus Scale Unit setting and change it to M for meters, unless you want to leave it with feet. So how do we work with this scale now? First, you should set a quite high F number on the lens for testing, for example aperture 8. If we now change the aperture to 8, and if I now change the focus on the focus ring, you can see how the blue area shifts and changes. This area shows me the focus zone in meters in which my image will be sharp. I can now just leave this setting and start taking pictures. The requirement for this is, of course, that there is sufficient light to shoot with this aperture. I can of course take care of that with the ISO audio settings, because the newer Fuji cameras can handle high ISO values very well. The next option would be correspondingly slow shutter speeds, which only makes sense for street photography if I want to capture motion blur or my object is not moving at all. Otherwise, I just choose a larger aperture and have to make sure that my object is in the blue zone of my scale. The larger the aperture, the harder that will be to achieve. But the advantages of this method are clear. No waiting for the autofocus and maybe missing it. You can make even annoyingly slow lenses and compact cameras work for you again. For example, my 18mm f2 is a nice lens, but its autofocus is not the fastest. It's even worse with the fixed lens of my X70, a compact camera by Fujifilm on which I'm planning a video about. But with zone focusing, you don't have to wait for these pieces of slowness. What many do not know, if you are in the M focus mode, you have another option to adjust the focus than with the focus ring on the lens. You can still set up the so-called back button focus. To do this, hold down the display button for 2 seconds to quickly access the button customization menu. There you select the AFL button and assign it to the AF on function. Now you can focus with this button even in mode M without using the lens ring. This means that despite zone focusing, you still have a quick focus option. Finally, I would like to show you how zone focusing works if you have a manual lens, for example an old one via adapter. In my last video I already showed how to adapt vintage lenses to modern cameras, but zone focusing is also possible with most modern but manual lenses, for example with those from Samyang, Meike or 7 Artisans, that are quite cheap by the way. So the lens you want to use only needs a specific scale on its housing, namely this one here, which is located on my old Rokkor 28mm between the aperture ring and the focus ring. If you want to buy a manual lens, vintage or not, take care that it has this scale on it. Now you can see that there is a center marking on which the aperture is set to. I will set the aperture now to 8. On both sides next to this marking you will find the aperture numbers on the scale again. You will have to look at the corresponding number to your aperture on both sides. Now have a look at the focus ring, which has markings for feet and meters. Now we set the distance of 1 meter on the 8 of the left side. Here's the 8, this is 1 meter. You now know that the focus zone starts at 1 meter with this specific setting of aperture 8. Now have a look to the 8 on the right side of the marking. You can now see that your focus zone ends at something between 2 and 4 meters, let's say 3 meters. Now let's change the focus to 2 meters on the left side to the 8. You will now have a focus zone from 2 meters to infinity. So you know everything from 2 meters to infinity will be in focus. What happens if we change now the aperture to aperture 4? The area between, let's say, something between 3 meters and infinity will be sharp. And if I change it here, then we'll know that there is something between 1 meter and to less than 2 meters sharp. It's the same principle like the blue bar of the MF distance indicator on your display, but analog. Oh my goodness, that's all. If you have any questions on this or any other topic, feel free to write me in the comments. I usually answer within a few hours. Don't forget to give me a like and please subscribe to my channel. Switch on the notifications so that you don't miss any more videos. Take care of yourself, have a good time. Ciao.